Hello, this is Isak Feiner with CUS Systems. At CUS, we support any business model, but today we're going to talk about something that we often get questions about, and that is how to think about wholesale pricing in open access networks. And we have prepared a couple of slides to explain what we consider best practices. So first of all, we got to define what type of open access model we're really talking about here. And this is a true lit open access model, and I'm going to explain what we mean. So in open access, you separate your network into three layers, basically. So you have the infrastructure layer, that is the conduits and the fiber. Then you have the operations layer. This is the electronics and the provisioning. So this is what we mean by a lit network. There is an operator in the middle that is actually provisioning services on behalf of multiple service providers in the services layer. And how does this work then? Who is paying who? So if we look at sort of the top of the pyramid here, we have the subscribers who are buying services from service providers, and obviously they're paying the service providers for their services. Then you have, in some cases, or probably most cases, a network owner and an operator, and they get paid wholesale fees by the service provider. And this is what we'll focus on, how to think about the wholesale fee structure. Another variant that is quite common with this model is where, again, the subscriber is paying the service provider for the service. The service providers are paying a network operator. And then the network operator is paying the network owner. And I don't know if there is a proper term for this, but I used to call it network lease. Basically, you can say that the network operator is leasing the fiber network from the network operator and owner, and monetizing it by inviting a number of providers. Another variant of this is where you have the same top here, but the service providers are actually paying the network owner, and the network owner is then paying the network operator for helping them operate their network. So when it comes to the thinking about the wholesale fees, it doesn't really matter what type of model it is, but it's good to understand that there are different models. This model is what I would call an outsourced operations model, since the network owner is contracting with the network operator to operate. Okay, so best practice number one, fiber is a take rate game. Make sure to have something for all customers. And this is not really on the wholesale prices, but more on the service offerings. What should the ISP sell? And I often talk about, gold, silver, bronze, or, premium or basic. Those kind of terms often exist. But if we translate this to services, of course, the actual speed packages could differ. But let's say you have the top package is a 5 gig, the silver a 1 gig, and the bronze package is a 250. Now, when it comes to pricing towards end customers, you would try to have this be an attractive price, of course, on the bronze, and then the 5 gig is a premium price, perhaps even really expensive. And what you typically see, comes with any industry where you're selling something to end customers. People tend to sort of end up in the middle. You don't want to be cheap and buy something that is not good, and you don't really need that fancy, the best one. So most people tend to end up here in the middle. That said, it might actually be smart to add that extra dollar on the 5 gig package, because those people who really want the best of the best, they're not always price sensitive. So Yeah, that's the way to think about it. Now, why would it be important to have this sort of bronze package? And that is because even if you build fiber, there is most of the time something else for the customer out there to get internet today. Could be fixed wireless, mobile, cable, satellite, or even in some places, DSL is still an option and perhaps the only option. But when it boils down to it, the there are many people, they just want internet. They don't really understand why fiber is so much better. And we're tech geeks in the industry, of course, so we completely understand the difference. But not all customers do it, and they are used to paying something for internet. And if you come with something, even though it's much better on fiber, they're still gonna compare the price. And that's why it is important to have these different speeds and have this sort of entry product to get them on the network. Because once they're on the network, you can do all sort of tricks, you can upgrade, you can run promotions, you can sell them additional services, and there are tons of ways to get the revenue up and make more money on the customers. But if they don't connect to your fiber network, there is nothing you can do about it. So that's why it is important to remember to have sort of a price fighter bronze product. And just for fun, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the benefits of open access while I'm talking about this stuff. So if you consider these options as what the customer can choose now, if you add a fiber offering, well, maybe you will reach a 45% take rate. Not everyone will like what you offer, but what we have seen in open access networks is that when you start introducing more providers, you will actually have better take rates simply because if we keep adding here, ISP number 3, 4, 5, and of course, the take rate will not just keep climbing at the same rate, but look at this. There's a lot to choose from now, and half of the options are actually on the same fiber network. And that is why if you build an open access network, you will see higher take rates because customers are just more likely to find something they like. Okay, and this is probably the most important slide I'm going to talk about now. Best practice number 2, price per service and not per pipe. And one way to look at open access is to see the fiber to the home as something that you sell to one provider. And it's theirs, but then you're really missing the point. Because if you have good software, you can actually slice this one fiber up into multiple different sort of virtual pipes to reach the customer for any application. So you could have the internet pipe with your internet provider. You could sell provisioned VoIP services or IPTV services or smart meters, security services, telehealth, and all of these could be different providers. And you charge them each a wholesale fee per service, meaning that, yeah, if they only pick the really cheap bronze option, you might only make $30 in this example. But if the customer over time adds more and more services on their fiber, you as the open access operator will follow with your revenue. So price each and every of these services instead of just giving the pipe away to one provider. Because what could happen is, you got to have at least $40 to pay for the investment in the fiber network. And that price level might actually be too high for the ISP to be competitive, which hurts your take rates. And back to what we talked about on the previous slide, it's really about the take rates. You need to get the customers on the network so that you can upgrade them over time. And with this model, you're not too worried about, one of those customers paying the lowest wholesale fee being a big problem because you can fix it over time. And if you look at the complete stock of customers on the network, your total revenue will still be much better. So price it per service, not per pipe. And another comment on this is that if you have a proper system to manage your open access network, you can provision services from multiple service providers at the same time, which is, of course, important for this type of pricing model. Best practice number 3, fixed wholesale fees and not revenue sharing. And of course, it feels natural when you think about open access that the ISP is selling to the customer and a share of the revenue is coming to you as the network operator or network owner and operator. And when you hear share, you immediately think percentage, but that is really dangerous. And I'm going to explain why you need to have fixed wholesale fees per service. So think about this model again. The subscriber is paying the service provider, and the service provider is paying the wholesale fee to you as the network owner and operator. And this might be the case. The subscriber is paying 59, and the service provider is paying you 45. Now, let's say that there is competition, or you want to get more customers on the network. So the ISP is giving their customers a 10% discount or reducing their price with 10%. Decent cut, actually, almost $6 for the end customer. And that means what they pay you in wholesale fees, if this would be a percentage of their revenue, is a reduction with $450. And if you do the math, the service provider, they live on their margin. So the margin the margin cut they had, the margin between 59 and 45, went from 14 to 12.60. So they lost $1.40 in revenue. The same calculation for you, since the bigger share of the revenue is actually going to you, was 450. And the ISP in an open access model, they only have variable costs, really, while the owner and operator, they spent all the money building the network, and therefore they cannot risk big revenue cuts. And especially if it's just a percentage of what the ISP is charging to their customer, because then you're not in full control. Of course, you can try to have contracts in place and so on, but really it doesn't allow the ISPs to really do whatever they want to do to compete to get customers, because they might be okay having really low margins for a couple of months just to get the customer and then work with them over time to get their margins up. But if that starts hurting you, you're in trouble as the network owner and operator. Best practice number 4, only one monthly bill to the subscriber. And in some networks, or the way the costs actually work, you might see that the subscriber is actually paying 2 bills. So they would pay the service provider for the service they're receiving, and then since the network owner and operator, back to the previous slide, they actually made investment in the network, you're paying the network owner and operator. And in some industries, we're kind of used to this. Electricity is sometimes structured in this way. And let's say, back to the previous example, if you pay for the sort of the wholesale fee, it's now a direct fee from the subscriber to the network owner instead. That would be 45. And maybe the ISP is invoicing the subscriber $15. This creates a lot of problems with this model. First of all, there are twice as many bills sent, and the subscriber has to pay 2 bills every month. It's just inefficient. And maybe the biggest problem is if you're a subscriber and you have a problem, who would you call? Are you now you're sort of you have two relationships. So you as the customer trying to determine, is this something that has to do with a network, or this might be related to my service from my provider? And as a subscriber, very few people can make that distinction. So they will sometimes be calling the network operator, they will sometimes be calling their ISP, and then they have a really bad experience because they're being tossed back and forth. And also, this means the network owner and operator, they don't uh, they don't need only like a second line support to ISPs. They need a support desk for end customer, which is completely unnecessary. And the problem with the 45 and the 15 is that many people, they call the company that sends them the biggest bill, right? Another problem that could occur, what if the subscriber is paying the ISP, but not the network operator, or the opposite? What do you do? Do you shut the customer down or no? I mean, this causes discussions between the network operator and the ISP on how to handle this. And then just the network fee. How do you explain it? And how do you explain that that fee stays over time? Shouldn't that eventually go away? Or, why am I paying so much just for the network? You built it 10 years ago and only this little to the ISP. You don't want to get into those kind of discussions. So it's better just to package the wholesale fee up under your ISPs and the ISP sending one bill to the customer. Okay, so the $1 million question, how much should everyone get? And now you're going to get the answer, almost, because there are a lot of considerations here. So, for example, what was the cost to build? If it was a really high cost to build a network, of course, the price the end customer will pay is obviously a bit higher, and the portion of the revenue that goes to covering the build cost is higher, and the ISP will get less if you think about a share of the revenue the end customer is paying. And also, who is paying for what? So is it a three-layer model and the network owner is actually paying for electronics? That's a big difference compared to if the operator is paying for electronics and then sort of leasing the network from the network owner, as we talked about. So really important. And also competition. What is the competition out there? Do you need to reduce prices to be able to get the take rates you need? Maybe the ISPs are competing among themselves, which will reduce their margins. And if they're competing among themselves, often it is to, get those customers and that initial take rate. And another really big consideration is, what is the goal with building this fiber network from the beginning? If you're a municipality, your goal is not to make money on this network necessarily. It's to make sure everyone is connected. And you're willing to build even into weaker areas just to make sure that everyone in your community is connected. And you have other types of revenue. If you can make your community attractive to more people, people might move in, businesses will move in or stay. And really the tax revenue is what is important to you. So you might even be okay losing money on the network just to be able for the ISPs to offer competitive prices so that the network is actually used. And this is something that I think is often overlooked by communities, that they sort of miss. They think they're they're an ISP or they are doing this to make money, but that's not really the purpose. If it's a privately owned network, different story. It's not they're in it to make make money, so they need the whole a bigger chunk of their revenue to pay for the network build. So a lot of considerations, but I'm still gonna try to give you one example here of what it could look like. So let's say the subscriber is paying 65 to the service provider for an internet service. Then a typical number would be that the service provider is paying 45 to a network operator, and this is now assuming that the network owner is doing all the provisioning, they are managing the electronics and pay for those and so on. And then maybe $15 per each paying customer would go to the network owner, because they have maybe 30-year perspective on this for getting their investment in the fiber network back. But again, a lot of different considerations, just throwing some numbers out there. And really the focus and goal for all of these entities, the service providers, network operators, and the network owners, would be to make sure that the end customer price is affordable, because you need to get those initial take rates up, because every passed home is just money put in the ground for nothing, buried spend, so to speak. So try to be competitive, at least with that bronze option we talked about previously. Okay, that was it. Thanks a lot for your attention. If you stuck with me all this time until now, and if you have any questions, just reach out, and we're happy to answer and discuss this further. Thank you.